I'm Daniel, a man who thought he had life figured out. At 38, I'd built a comfortable existence in our suburban neighborhood. A quiet corner of the world where the lawns were always trimmed, and the neighbors waved with practiced smiles. My wife, Clara, was the kind of woman who turned heads without trying. Dark hair that fell in waves, eyes that sparkled with a warmth I once thought was reserved for me, and a laugh that could make any room feel like home. We'd been married for 12 years, together for 15, and I'd spent most of those years believing we were untouchable. A team, the kind of couple people envied at dinner parties, where we'd share stories of our travels or our plans for the future. Her hand resting lightly on my arm, my pride in her as constant as the sunrise. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I worked as a structural engineer, designing bridges and buildings, spending long hours poring over blueprints and calculations. Clara was a freelance graphic designer, her days filled with bursts of creativity and the freedom to set her own schedule. We had a rhythm, mornings with coffee and quiet banter, evenings with takeout or home-cooked meals, and weekends where we'd escape to the mountains or binge-watch some new series. Our daughter, Lily, was 9. A whirlwind of energy with her mother's eyes and my stubborn streak. Everything seemed solid, like one of my bridges, built to withstand any storm. But cracks don't always announce themselves. They start small, invisible, spreading beneath the surface until the whole structure groans under the weight. Looking back, I see the signs I missed. The late nights Clara spent working in her home office, the way her phone was always face down, the distracted smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. I thought it was stress, maybe a creative block or the pressure of juggling motherhood and her career. I told myself we were fine, that love like ours didn't falter. I was wrong. Started with a name, Ethan. He was a client, someone Clara had met through a design project for a local brewery. She'd mentioned him in passing. A charming guy with a knack for branding, someone who got her aesthetic. I didn't think much of it. Clara's work often involved long meetings with clients, brainstorming sessions that bled into dinners or drinks. It was part of her world, and I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife, the woman who'd cried in my arms when her father passed, who'd laughed with me over burnt pancakes on lazy Sundays, who'd held my hand through every milestone and misstep. Trust wasn't just a choice. It was the foundation of everything we were. The first hint came on a Tuesday in early spring. I'd come home early from a site visit, my boots still dusted with construction dirt, expecting to find Clara sketching at the kitchen table or helping Lily with homework. Instead, the house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. Lily was at a friend's house, and Clara's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't in her office or the living room. I called her name, my voice echoing in the stillness. No answer. Then I heard it, a faint laugh coming from the backyard. I stepped onto the patio and saw her, sitting on the swing we'd built for Lily, her phone pressed to her ear. She was smiling, that private, unguarded smile I hadn't seen in months, her voice low and teasing. "You're ridiculous," she said, laughing again. "No, I can't, not right now. He'll be home soon." I froze. Something in her tone, too intimate, too soft, sent a prickle down my spine. She hadn't seen me yet, so I stepped back inside, my heart thudding. I told myself it was nothing. A friend, a colleague, a harmless conversation. But when she came inside a few minutes later, her cheeks flushed. She startled at the sight of me. "Oh, you're home early," she said, her voice too bright, her hands fumbling with her phone as she slipped it into her pocket. "Just catching up with a client." "Which one?" I asked, keeping my tone casual, though my gut was twisting. "Ethan," she said, not meeting my eyes. "He had some ideas for the brewery campaign." I nodded, swallowing the unease. "Sounds like a fun call," I said, testing the waters. She laughed, but it was forced, a little too sharp. "Yeah, he's got a lot of energy. Keeps things interesting." She changed the subject, asking about my day, and I let it go. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband, the one who reads into every smile or late night. But the seed was planted, and it grew in the quiet moments, when I'd catch her texting with a secretive grin, or when she'd slip out for errands that took longer than they should. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's name came up more often. Clara would mention a meeting with him, a new project they were collaborating on, or some anecdote about his quirky sense of humor. I started noticing things I hadn't before. How she'd dress up for these meetings, trading her usual jeans and sweaters for dresses that hugged her curves. How she'd linger in the shower afterward, as if washing away something I couldn't see. I tried to talk myself out of it. Clara wasn't the type to stray. She was loyal, devoted. The woman who'd planned our 10th anniversary trip to Italy with meticulous care, who'd framed every one of Lily's drawings like they were museum pieces. But doubt is a relentless thing, and once it takes hold, it colors everything. I started paying attention. Not spying, not yet, but observing. The way her phone buzzed at odd hours, the way she'd angle the screen away from me when she typed. One night, after she'd fallen asleep, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. It was locked, of course, with a passcode I didn't know. That alone felt like a betrayal. We'd always shared everything, from bank accounts to passwords. When had that changed? I sat there in the dark, her phone heavy in my hand, my stomach churning with guilt and suspicion. I put it back, telling myself I was overreacting, but sleep didn't come that night. The real blow came a month later, at a neighborhood barbecue. It was one of those warm, golden evenings where the air smells of charcoal and cut grass, and kids run wild while adults sip beer and pretend their lives are perfect. Clara had been distant all day, her smiles perfunctory, her attention elsewhere. I was flipping burgers when I saw him, Ethan. He wasn't a client at a barbecue. He was a guest, invited by one of our neighbors, Tom, who ran the brewery. Ethan was younger than me, maybe early 30s, with the kind of effortless charm that makes people lean in when he talks. He had sharp cheekbones, a disarming grin, and a way of moving that suggested he was always in control. I watched him from across the yard, laughing with Tom, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Clara. She was by the drink table, pouring lemonade for Lily, and when she saw Ethan, her face lit up. Not the polite smile she gave neighbors or the tired one she gave me lately, but something alive, electric. They hugged. A little too long, a little too close, and I felt the burger I was holding slip from the spatula. No one else seemed to notice. The party hummed along, all chatter and clinking glasses, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. They talked for a while, their heads bent together, her hand brushing his arm once, twice. When she laughed at something he said, it was that same laugh from the backyard, the one that wasn't for me. I didn't confront her that night. Couldn't. Not with Lily there. Not with our neighbors milling around. Not when I wasn't sure what I'd seen. But the image burned into me. Clara's hand on his arm, the way her body angled toward him like he was the only person in the yard. I spent the rest of the evening in a haze, smiling when I had to, answering questions about work or the weather, while my mind spun with questions I didn't want to ask. Was this real? Was I imagining it? And if I wasn't, what did it mean for us? The next morning, I tried to talk to her. We were in the kitchen, Lily still asleep, the house quiet except for the drip of the coffee maker. You seemed to hit it off with Ethan last night, I said, keeping my voice light, stirring sugar into my mug. She didn't look up from her phone. Yeah, he's fun. Easy to talk to. Seemed like more than that, I said, testing, my heart pounding. She froze, just for a second, then laughed. What's that supposed to mean? He's a client, Dan. We work together. You know how it is. But I didn't know. Not anymore. Her words were reasonable, her tone steady, but there was something off, like a note played just out of tune. I let it go, because what else could I do? I didn't have proof, only a gnawing feeling that the woman I loved, the woman I'd built my life with, was slipping away. Over the next few days, I became a man I didn't recognize. I checked her laptop when she was out, scrolling through her emails, finding nothing but work correspondence with Ethan. Professional, polished, but with a warmth that felt too personal. I started tracking her location through the app we'd installed for Lily's safety, noticing how often she was at the brewery or a coffee shop downtown, places she'd never mentioned. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. The trust we'd built over years was crumbling, and I was the one holding the sledgehammer, desperate to know if I was crazy or if my world was falling apart. Then came the night that broke everything. It was a Thursday, and Clara said she had a late meeting with Ethan to finalize a campaign. She kissed me goodbye, her lips brushing mine with a distracted softness, and left. Lily was at a sleepover, so the house was mine, but it felt empty, hollow. I tried to work, to focus on blueprints, but my mind kept circling back to her. To him. Around 9 p.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the brewery, telling myself I'd just check, just see if her car was there, just put my fears to rest. Her car was in the lot, parked next to a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. The brewery was closed, the windows dark, but there was a light on in the back, where the offices were. I sat in my truck, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my breath shallow. I don't know how long I waited, maybe an hour, maybe two, until the back door opened, and there they were, Clara and Ethan, stepping out into the night. They didn't see me, didn't know I was there. She was laughing, her hair loose, her body relaxed in a way it hadn't been with me in months. He said something, and she leaned into him, her hand on his chest, their faces close. Then they kissed. Not a peck, not a mistake, but a kiss that spoke of familiarity, of hunger, of something that had been going on for a long time. I didn't move, couldn't. My heart was a fist in my chest, my vision blurring as they pulled apart, her hand lingering on his arm before she walked to her car. She drove away, and he watched her go, a satisfied smile on his face. I sat there, in the dark, as the truth settled over me like ash. My wife was betraying me, not just with a moment, not with a lapse, but with a choice deliberate and repeated. And I had no idea what to do next. The drive home from the brewery was a blur, the streetlights streaking past like comets in my peripheral vision. My hands shook on the steering wheel, my knuckles white, as if gripping it tightly could anchor me to the life I thought I had. Clara's car was already in the driveway when I pulled in, her silhouette moving behind the kitchen curtains. She was home, acting as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just shattered everything we'd built. I sat in my truck for a long time, the engine ticking as it cooled, my mind a storm of rage and grief. How could she? How long had this been going on? And why wasn't I enough? I wanted to storm inside, to confront her, to demand answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear of hearing the truth, fear of what it would mean for Lily, for us. Or maybe it was something colder, something that was already taking shape in the back of my mind. A need to understand, to know the full extent of her betrayal before I decided what to do. I wasn't ready to tear our life apart. Not yet. So I took a deep breath, forced my face into a mask of normalcy, and walked into the house. Clara was at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables for a late dinner, humming softly to herself. The normalcy of it was obscene. Her casual ease, the way she smiled when she saw me, as if she hadn't just been kissing another man in a dark parking lot. "Hey, you're late," she said, her voice light. "Long day at the site?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, lots to wrap up." The lie came easily, and I hated how natural it felt. I watched her move, her hands deft with the knife, her hair tucked behind one ear. She was beautiful, radiant, and I wondered how I'd missed the shift in her, the moment she'd stopped being mine. "How was your meeting?" I asked, keeping my tone even, though every word felt like swallowing glass. She didn't falter, didn't hesitate. "Oh, good. We finalized the campaign." Ethan's thrilled with the designs. Her eyes flicked to mine, then back to the cutting board. "It's going to be a big win for the brewery." Ethan. His name was a blade, slicing through the air between us. I wanted to scream, to ask her why she'd kissed him, why she'd lied, but I didn't. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, my hands steady despite the chaos inside me. "Sounds like you two are getting along well," I said, testing her again, searching for a crack in her facade. She laughed a little too brightly. "Yeah, he's easy to work with. Keeps things light." She set the knife down, turning to face me, and for a moment, I thought I saw something. Guilt, maybe, or fear. But then she smiled, that warm, familiar smile and said, "You okay? You look tired." I wanted to believe her concern was real, but all I could see was her hand on Ethan's chest, her lips on his. "Just a long day," I said, and excused myself to shower, needing to escape her presence before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I lay awake next to her breathing soft and even, her body curled away from me. The space between us felt like a chasm. I replayed the scene at the brewery over and over, dissecting every detail. The way her body leaned into his, the ease of their intimacy, the way she'd looked at him like he was the only man in the world. I wondered how many times it had happened, how many nights she'd come home to me smelling of him, how many lies she'd told to cover her tracks. The questions gnawed at me, each one a fresh wound, and by morning, I knew I couldn't let it go. I needed proof, something concrete, something that would either confirm my worst fears or, though I barely dared hope, prove me wrong. The next day I started digging. It felt wrong, like I was betraying her by doubting her. But the image of that kiss was a fire in my chest, burning away any guilt. I began with her laptop, waiting until she was out running errands. Her password was still the same, Lily's birthday, a detail that stung with its familiarity. Her email was a dead end, just as before, but I found a folder buried in her cloud storage labeled Inspiration. Most of it was design mock-ups, mood boards, and color palettes, but there were photos too, selfies of her and Ethan at a coffee shop, at a park, at some rooftop bar I didn't recognize. In one, his arm was around her head resting on his shoulder, both of them grinning like teenagers. The timestamp was from 3 months ago. 3 months. My stomach lurched, and I had to step away, my hands shaking as I closed the laptop. I didn't stop there. I checked her phone's location history when she left it unattended, mapping out her meetings with Ethan, late nights at the brewery, afternoons at a hotel downtown, weekends when she told me she was visiting her sister in the next town. I even called her sister casually to confirm. "Clara? No, she hasn't been here in months," her sister said, oblivious to the bomb she'd just dropped. Each discovery was a brick in the wall of her deception, and with every piece, my love for her twisted into something darker. Anger, yes, but also a cold, calculating resolve. I hired a private investigator, a man named Paul with a gravelly voice and a no-nonsense demeanor. I didn't want to be the cliché husband tailing his wife, but I needed answers, and I needed them to be undeniable. Paul didn't ask too many questions, just took my deposit and promised results. A week later, he delivered a report that made my blood run cold. Photos of Clara and Ethan together, at restaurants, in his car, entering and leaving that same hotel. Text messages, intercepted from her phone, filled with flirtation and intimacy, plans for rendezvous, and worse, declarations of feelings I thought she reserved for me. "I can't stop thinking about you," she'd written to him. "You make me feel alive." I read those words until they blurred, each one a dagger in my heart. The report detailed their affair going back at least 6 months, maybe longer. They'd been careful, but not careful enough. Paul had even caught audio of a conversation at a cafe, where Clara laughed about how busy I was with work, how I'd never suspect anything. "Dan's too focused on his bridges," she'd said, her voice light, dismissive. "He doesn't see what's right in front of him." Ethan had laughed, called her his secret, and I had to stop reading to keep from vomiting. I didn't confront her right away. Couldn't. The rage was there, simmering. But so was a need for something more than a shouting match or a tearful confession. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done, to understand the depth of the betrayal she'd inflicted. I wanted Ethan to feel it too. This wasn't just about a broken vow. It was about the life we'd built, the trust I'd poured into her, the future I'd imagined for us and Lily. They'd taken that from me, and I wasn't going to let it go quietly. I started planning, though I didn't know what revenge meant yet. It wasn't enough to leave her, to walk away and let them have their stolen moments. I wanted them to hurt, to lose something as precious as what they'd taken from me. But I had to be smart, careful, precise. Like one of my bridges, every piece calculated to bear the load. I began by gathering more information, not just about their affair but about Ethan. Who was he? What did he value? What could I take from him? Ethan, I learned, was more than just a charming client. He was a rising star in the local business scene, the brewery's marketing director with ambitions to start his own firm. He had a reputation for being charismatic, driven, a man who got what he wanted. He lived in a sleek downtown loft, drove a car that cost more than my annual salary, and had a network of influential friends. But he also had vulnerabilities. Debts from a failed startup, a pending deal with investors that could make or break his career, and a fiancée, Sarah, who had no idea about Clara. That last detail was a spark in the dark. Sarah. She was his blind spot, just as I'd been Clara's. I met Sarah under the guise of a professional consultation. I told her I was considering a branding overhaul for my firm and had heard Ethan's brewery was the best in town. She was kind, unassuming, with a quiet strength that reminded me of Clara in our early years. Over coffee, I steered the conversation to Ethan, probing gently. She glowed when she talked about him, her trust in him absolute. He's been so busy with work, she said, oblivious to the irony. But he's worth it. He's got this way of making everything feel possible. I nodded, smiling, while my mind churned. She didn't deserve this, any more than I did. But she was a piece of the puzzle, a lever I could pull when the time came. I also started watching Ethan, learning his routines. He was predictable, mornings at the gym, afternoons at the brewery, evenings at upscale bars or with Clara. I followed him once, keeping my distance, my truck blending into the city's traffic. I saw them together again, at a park this time, their hands brushing as they walked, her laughter carrying on the breeze. Each sighting fueled the fire in me, but it also sharpened my focus. I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a man with a plan, though the details were still forming. At home, I played the part of the oblivious husband, though it killed me to do it. I kissed Clara goodnight, helped Lily with her homework, and kept up the charade of our perfect life. But every smile I gave Clara was a lie, every touch a reminder of her deceit. I started documenting everything, her lies, her absences, the photos and texts from Paul's report. I saved them in a locked file, a growing archive of her betrayal. I didn't know how I'd use it yet, but I knew it would matter. Knowledge was power, and I was arming myself for what was to come. One night, as Clara slept, I sat in my office, staring at a photo of us from our honeymoon. Her in a sundress, me grinning like I'd won the lottery, the Italian coast sparkling behind us. I wondered where that version of us had gone, if it had ever been real. The pain was still there, raw and jagged, but it was hardening into something else, something purposeful. I wasn't going to let Clara and Ethan walk away unscathed. They'd built their happiness on my ruin, and I was going to make sure they paid for it. Not with violence or confrontation, that was too simple, too fleeting. I wanted something lasting, something that would haunt them as their betrayal haunted me. I didn't have a name for it yet, but the shape of my revenge was taking form, a structure as deliberate and unyielding as the bridges I designed. And when it was ready, they'd feel every ounce of the weight they'd placed on me. The plan took shape in the quiet hours, when the house was still and my mind was anything but. It wasn't enough to expose Clara and Ethan, to lay their betrayal bare and walk away. Exposure was temporary, a scandal that would fade with time. I wanted something that would linger, something that would dismantle their lives as thoroughly as they'd dismantled mine. I wanted them to feel the same hollowness, the same betrayal, the same slow erosion of everything they thought was secure. And I wanted it to be precise, like a bridge engineered to collapse at the exact moment I chose. I spent weeks refining the details, moving pieces like a chess player plotting checkmate. The private investigator, Paul, became my shadow partner, feeding me information on Ethan's life, his finances, his business deals, his habits. I learned about his investors, a group of wealthy locals banking on his brewery expansion to turn a profit. I learned about his fiancée, Sarah, who was planning their wedding, oblivious to the man she was tying her future to. And I learned about Clara's routines, the lies she wove so effortlessly, the way she balanced her double life with a smile that still made my chest ache. Every piece of information was a tool, a brick in the structure of their downfall. The first step was Sarah. She was the linchpin, the one who could unravel Ethan's world without ever knowing I'd set it in motion. I arranged another meeting with her, this time at a quiet cafe downtown, under the pretense of discussing a new project. I brought a folder of design concepts, but tucked inside was a single photo from Paul's report. Clara and Ethan, caught mid-kiss outside the brewery, their bodies pressed close, unmistakable. I slid the folder across the table, my voice steady as I talked about branding, watching her flip through the pages. When she reached the photo, her face froze, her fingers hovering over the image as if she could will it away. "Oh," I said, feigning surprise, leaning over to look. "That must have gotten mixed in by mistake. I'm so sorry, Sarah." I let my voice soften, laced with just enough sympathy to seem genuine. "I didn't mean for you to see that." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry, not then. She closed the folder, her hands trembling, and asked in a whisper, "Who is she?" I told her the truth. Clara, a graphic designer working with Ethan, someone I'd met through mutual friends. I didn't mention my connection to Clara, didn't let on that I was anything more than a concerned bystander. Sarah nodded, her jaw tight, and thanked me for my honesty. I could see the storm brewing in her, the same storm that had been raging in me for weeks. As I left the cafe, I knew I'd lit the fuse. Sarah didn't waste time. 2 days later, Paul sent me a text. Ethan's engagement was off. Sarah had confronted him, shown him the photo, and he tried to lie his way out, claiming it was a one-time mistake. But Sarah wasn't the type to be placated with half-truths. She'd packed her things and left his loft, leaving behind a note that, according to Paul's sources, called him out for every lie he'd told. Ethan was rattled, his charm cracking under the pressure of losing the woman he'd planned to marry. I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was only the beginning. Next, I turned to Ethan's business. His brewery expansion hinged on a deal with 3 investors, men who valued reputation and stability. I'd done my homework. They were conservative, risk-averse, the kind of people who'd pull out at the first whiff of scandal. I created an anonymous email account and sent them a carefully curated package. Screenshots of Ethan's texts with Clara, financial records showing his mounting debts, and a detailed account of his unprofessional conduct with a contractor, Clara. I framed it as a concerned insider, someone worried about the brewery's future. I didn't need to exaggerate. The truth was damning enough. Within a week, the investors started asking questions. Paul, who had a knack for eavesdropping on the right conversations, reported that they were spooked, questioning Ethan's judgment and reliability. One of them, a family man with a zero-tolerance policy for infidelity, was particularly incensed. By the end of the month, 2 of the 3 had pulled their funding, and the third was wavering. Ethan's dream of a brewery empire was crumbling, his reputation in the local business community taking hit after hit. He was scrambling, making desperate calls to new investors, but the damage was done. I watched from a distance, my name never tied to the chaos, as his world began to implode. Clara was next, and this was the hardest part. She was still my wife, the mother of my daughter, the woman I'd loved for half my life. But she was also the person who'd looked me in the eye and lied, who'd built a secret life while I was building bridges to keep us safe. I didn't want to hurt Lily, that was non-negotiable, so I had to be surgical, ensuring the fallout didn't touch our daughter. I started by planting seeds of doubt in Clara's mind, subtle enough to keep her off balance. I'd mention Ethan casually, dropping hints about his troubles at the brewery, watching her face for reactions. She'd tense, her smile faltering, but she'd brush it off, saying he was just stressed, that work was tough. I nodded, playing the supportive husband, while I tightened the noose. The real blow came through her war. Clara's freelance career depended on her reputation, her ability to charm clients and deliver stunning designs. I used another anonymous account to contact her major clients, including the brewery, with a tip about her unprofessional behavior. I included snippets of her texts with Ethan, carefully edited to remove his name, but clear enough to show she was mixing personal and professional in ways that could embarrass her clients. I framed it as a warning from a concerned colleague, someone who'd seen her prioritize personal relationships over deadlines. It wasn't entirely untrue. She'd missed a few deliverables lately, distracted by her affair. The brewery dropped her contract within days, citing creative differences. 2 other clients followed. One after a tense phone call I overheard from the living room, Clara's voice rising in panic as she tried to salvage the deal. She came to me that night, her eyes red, saying her career was falling apart, and she didn't know why. I held her, my arms stiff, murmuring reassurances while my mind screamed with the irony. She was losing what she valued most, her independence, her creative identity, and I was the architect of that loss, just as she'd been the architect of mine. The final piece was personal, a way to make them both feel the betrayal in their bones. I waited for the right moment, a night when Lily was at her grandparents' and Clara was out, supposedly at a networking event. I knew she was with Ethan. Paul had confirmed they were at his loft, drowning their sorrows in each other as their worlds unraveled. I drove to their usual hotel, not to confront them but to leave something behind. I'd printed a collage of Paul's photos, Clara and Ethan kissing, laughing, tangled in each other's arms, along with a note in block letters. "You took my life. Now I'm taking yours." I left it under the windshield wiper of Ethan's car, knowing he'd see it, knowing it would hit them both like a freight train. I was home when Clara returned, her face pale, her hands shaking as she set her keys on the counter. "Something wrong?" I asked, my voice calm, though my pulse was racing. She shook her head, too quickly. "Just a weird night." She didn't look at me, didn't kiss me goodnight, just went upstairs to shower. I knew she'd seen the note, or Ethan had told her. I knew they were both reeling, wondering who knew, how much and what came next. I let the silence stretch, let the fear settle in their bones. The next morning I filed for divorce. I didn't tell Clara, not yet. I met with a lawyer, a sharp woman named Karen who specialized in high-conflict cases. I gave her everything, Paul's report, the texts, the photos, my meticulous records of Clara's lies. Karen laid out my options. A clean split with shared custody of Lily, or a fight for everything. Alimony, assets, the house. I didn't want to drag Lily through a war, but I wanted Clara to feel the consequences. We agreed on a strategy that would protect Lily while ensuring Clara didn't walk away unscathed. I'd keep the house, citing my financial contributions and her infidelity as leverage. I'd push for primary custody, arguing that Clara's instability, her affair, her crumbling career, made her unfit for equal time. It was cold, calculated, and I felt no guilt. When I finally confronted Clara, it was a week later, over breakfast. Lily was at school and we were alone, the kitchen table between us like a battlefield. I slid the divorce papers across to her, my face blank. "I know about Ethan," I said, my voice low. "I know everything." She stared at the papers, her breath catching, her eyes darting to mine. "Dan, she started, but I cut her off. "Don't," I said. "Don't lie to me again. I saw you. I have proof. You made your choice, and now you live with it." She cried then, tears streaming down her face, apologies tumbling out. How it just happened. How she never meant to hurt me. How she still loved me. I listened, my heart a stone, and when she was done, I said, "You don't get to love me anymore. You lost that right." I stood, leaving her at the table, the papers untouched. I didn't need her signature to move forward. I had enough to make it happen. Ethan's life continued to unravel. His brewery deal collapsed entirely when the third investor pulled out, citing personal concerns. Rumors of his infidelity spread, thanks to Sarah's tight-knit circle, and his reputation in the business community soured. He tried to reach out to Clara, but she was too shaken by the note, by my confrontation, to respond. I knew because I still had access to her phone, though I didn't need to check it anymore. The damage was done. I moved out of the master bedroom, sleeping in the guest room, keeping things civil for Lily's sake. Clara tried to talk to me, to beg for another chance, but I shut her down. "This isn't about forgiveness," I told her. "It's about consequences." Lily sensed the tension but didn't know the details, and I made sure it stayed that way. I took her to school, helped with her projects, kept her world as steady as I could while I dismantled her mother's. Months later, the divorce was finalized. I got the house, primary custody, and a modest alimony settlement that left Clara scrambling to rebuild her career. She moved into a small apartment, her client list a fraction of what it had been. Ethan's brewery went under, and he left town, his dreams in tatters, his name a whisper in the circles that once celebrated him. I didn't follow his path after that. I didn't need to. He'd lost everything that mattered to him, just as I'd planned. I rebuilt my life piece by piece. Lily and I grew closer, our bond a lifeline through the pain. I took up new projects, designed bridges that felt like metaphors for my own resilience. The hurt didn't vanish, but it dulled, replaced by a quiet strength. Clara and Ethan had taken something precious from me, but I'd taken something back. Not just revenge, but control. I'd shown them that betrayal has a price, and I'd made them pay it in full.